The forge glowed like a heartbeat against the black Virginia night. Sparks rose and died in the air, each one a brief rebellion against the dark. Inside, James Rutled hammered iron into shape, the rhythm steady, deliberate, the sound of a man making sense of a world that refused to see him as one. Outside, thunder gathered. Somewhere beyond the trees, a carriage creaked toward Belmont Hall, bringing with it the man who would end James's life as he knew it. He paused, feeling it before it arrived, the weight of decisions made in rooms he would never enter, by men whose power felt eternal, the smell of iron, the taste of ash, the hum of something terrible drawing near. History would later erase his name with the precision of a ledger line. But that night, he was still whole, still burning, still unbroken, and by dawn, that fire would be turned against him. If that opening struck a nerve, stay with me. This isn't just history, it's a reckoning. Every week we unearth the stories buried beneath polite lies and fading ink. Subscribe to Liturgy of Men, where loyalty, power, and silence collide, because the past doesn't stay buried, it waits. The forge sang under his hands. Steel met hammer, hammer met purpose. Every strike was a prayer, every spark a confession. James Rutled worked as though redemption could be shaped in iron. Heat licked his forearms. Sweat pooled along his spine. The scent of burnt metal and oak charcoal filled the air, sharp, masculine, alive. Beside him, old Jacob Thornhill watched, eyes narrowed against the glow. "Steady, boy," Jacob muttered, voice coarse from smoke and age. "Iron don't forgive hurry." He leaned against the workbench, one hand gripping the edge like a preacher holding a pulpit. James nodded. "I know." His tone carried that quiet certainty Jacob admired. Not pride, not defiance, but the calm of a man who knew his strength. The anvil roared again beneath him. Outside, night pressed close against the forge walls. Crickets chirped beyond the fields, a rhythm faintly in time with the hammer. Somewhere distant, thunder rumbled like a warning. Jacob spat into the dust. Storm coming. He watched the boy's shoulders flex, the iron bend beneath his strikes. Storm always coming, one way or another. James quenched the glowing rod, steam erupting like breath from the underworld. He stared into the rising cloud, seeing not vapor, but fate forming shape. Across the yard, a lantern swung. Overseer Hicks's silhouette moved toward them, broad and unhurried. "Master Marcus wants the new hinges before sundown," Hicks barked. "And no mistakes." Jacob wiped his brow with a rag, muttering beneath his breath. "Man couldn't spot a mistake if it bit him." James didn't respond. He never did. The overseer's kind thrived on reaction. When Hicks left, Jacob said softly, "You're too quiet for this place." His eyes gleamed through the forge's glow. "Quiet men get noticed." James smiled faintly. "Or forgotten." "Don't be clever, boy," Jacob warned. "You think silence keeps you safe, but it don't. Makes men wonder what's behind it. Wonder turns dangerous when it's mixed with power." The hammer fell again. Sparks scattered across the dirt like fireflies. James shaped the hinge until its lines were perfect. He could feel Jacob's gaze, pride mixed with worry. "You've got gift," Jacob said finally. "Hands like yours could build kingdoms." His voice softened. "Or graves." James met his eyes, something heavy passing between them, respect built on survival. When the storm broke, rain lashed against the forge roof. Wind howled through cracks, carrying the smell of wet soil and tobacco leaves from the fields. They worked on anyway. For men like them, stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant danger. It brought faces to mind, overseers, masters, fathers. It brought questions no one dared ask aloud. By midnight, the hinges were done. Jacob tested them, nodding once. Good. He hung his apron, bones aching with years of heat and hammer. Get rest, James. Tomorrow's worse. James smiled faintly. Ain't it always? He banked the coals, the last embers pulsing like dying stars. The night outside had gone quiet, thick with something unsaid. He walked back to his quarters. The mud clung to his boots, the rain easing into mist. Every shadow looked alive. Every silence felt watched. Inside his cabin, men lay sleeping. Field hands, carpenters, drivers. The air was thick with breath and dreams. James sat near the wall, staring at his scarred palms. Those hands had built gates, mended chains, repaired plows, tools of labor, instruments of survival. But they couldn't forge freedom, not yet. The thought burned more than the forge's heat. He closed his eyes, hearing Jacob's words again. Hands like yours could build kingdoms or graves. He didn't know which he was building. Maybe both. At dawn, the bell rang across Belmont Hall. Men rose in silence. The sky bled red behind the hills. James joined the line, walking toward work, the rhythm of another day. Marcus Sutherland watched from his veranda, tall, composed, wrapped in a coat, despite the warmth. His eyes followed the men like a god surveying his imperfect creation. Jacob approached him with the morning report. "Hinges done," he said. Marcus nodded. "Good. Keep the boy on forge work. He's efficient." His tone was praise spoken as command. Jacob hesitated. "He's more than efficient, sir." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "He's property, Thornhill. Efficiency's all that matters." Then he turned away, conversation dismissed like smoke. When Jacob returned to the forge, James was already there, feeding the fire. "He speak of me?" James asked. "He spoke of profit," Jacob answered. "Same thing to men like him." They worked without words. The rhythm of iron replaced language. In that rhythm lived everything they couldn't say: fear, anger, hope, beaten flat and cooled to silence. By noon, heat shimmered in the yard. The overseer's whip cracked somewhere distant, sharp as thunder. James didn't flinch. He'd learned not to react to sounds of pain. Jacob watched him again, something fatherly in his stare. "You'll outlast this place," he said quietly, "if you keep your head low." James didn't look up. "And if I don't?" Jacob's expression darkened. "Then you'll be a story men whisper about after work. A warning." He gestured toward the fire. "This world don't forgive sparks." That night, after the fields fell silent, James stayed behind. He struck one last blow, not on iron but on thought. A plan forming, dangerous and small as flame. He looked at his reflection in the quenching bucket, rippling, uncertain. The face staring back wasn't broken yet, but it knew the shape of the chains around it. He whispered into the smoke, not a prayer, not defiance, something in between. A vow to endure, to wait for his moment, to hold the heat until the iron of fate softened. Outside, the thunder returned. The night breathed heavy, and somewhere beyond the forge walls, wheels creaked on wet earth, the sound of destiny arriving at Belmont Hall. James lifted his head, eyes narrowing toward the sound. Jacob's warning echoed faintly in his mind. Storm always coming, one way or another. The hammer slipped from his hand and struck the floor, ringing like prophecy. He didn't move to pick it up. The sound faded, leaving only silence, thick, alive, waiting. He stepped into the rain, the forge at his back still glowing like an open wound. Every drop that hit his skin felt like the world testing his resolve. Tomorrow new orders would come, new work, new danger. He could feel it in his bones, in the way the air held its breath. Something was shifting. The storm broke fully, washing the yard clean. But James knew some things could never be cleansed. Not the heat, not the hunger, not the truth hammering at the edge of dawn. The morning sun rose over Belmont Hall like a blade. Its light cut through mist and memory, touching the forge first, the one place where truth still breathed among men. James stood at the anvil before dawn. He worked with focus so pure it bordered on defiance. Each strike against iron was a heartbeat, each spark a refusal to kneel before silence. Jacob arrived late, coughing into his sleeve. His lungs had grown brittle from years of smoke, yet his spirit stayed sharp. "You hear?" he rasped. "Master's back from Richmond. Contract signed. He's in high temper." James nodded without looking up. "Then I'll keep quiet." Jacob grinned faintly. "You always do, boy. But quiet can turn to rumor faster than words." The old man's warning settled like coal dust in the air. Outside, the plantation stirred. Men marched toward fields, overseers barking orders. The forge's rhythm joined that larger pulse, the music of survival under another man's rule. By midday, Marcus Sutherland entered. His boots were polished, his jaw tight from travel and pride. "Fine work," he said, examining a set of hinges. "Precision is a rare virtue." James kept his eyes low. "Thank you, sir." Marcus studied him a moment longer, tone softening. "You've got discipline. I value that. Stay diligent and you'll keep your place here." When Marcus left, Jacob exhaled. That man's approval ain't blessing. It's leash. He sat heavily on a stool, rubbing his wrists. Still, better leash than lash. James said nothing. That evening, rain came again. James worked through it, the forge hissing with steam. The storm outside mirrored something stirring inside him, a sense that calm never lasts. At supper, the quarters were tense. Hicks had beaten a driver that afternoon. The men ate in silence, every sound measured. James stared at his bread until Jacob whispered, "Keep low. Eyes on the hammer." He tried. But the next morning, change came disguised as routine. Hicks arrived with new orders. "Master says you're needed up at the house," he said. "Repairs on the east wing." James's stomach tightened. "Ain't that field crew work?" Hicks shrugged. "Don't ask questions. Do your job." The overseer's smirk carried something poisonous, like a secret already half-spoken. The main house loomed white and cold against the rising sun. Marcus was away in town, leaving his younger brother Nathan to oversee operations. Nathan's presence meant trouble. Nathan Sutherland was everything his brother wasn't, charming, reckless, cruel beneath his laughter. He strolled across the veranda, coat unbuttoned, eyes sharp with idle hunger. "You the smith?" "Yes, sir." James's voice was steady. Nathan stepped closer. "Marcus praises your work, says you're the best hand he owns." His grin twisted. "That must make you proud." James kept still. "I'm just a worker, sir." Nathan chuckled. "Ain't we all?" He tossed a coin into the dirt. "Let's see if your hands are worth the stories." His gaze lingered too long. Through the day, James repaired hinges and locks. Nathan watched from the shade, sipping whiskey, voice low with mock praise. "You swing that hammer like preacher swings judgment." When dusk came, Nathan called Hicks. "See that this one gets his rest. He's to work the forge at dawn again." Hicks nodded, eyes flicking between them. A hint of unease buried deep. That night, Jacob found James sitting outside the quarters, staring at the sky. "Something's wrong," the old man said softly. James didn't deny it. "His brother's different. Dangerous." Jacob sighed. "They all dangerous. Just different ways of hiding it." He placed a hand on James's shoulder. "Keep your work clean. Don't give them stories to tell." But stories didn't need truth to grow. By week's end, whispers spread through the quarters. Quiet, sharp, poisonous. Nathan had spoken too freely in town, words twisted like snakes. Men avoided James's gaze. Hicks's tone grew sharper. Marcus returned home with questions in his eyes and judgment on his breath. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Jacob confronted Hicks one evening near the stables. "You know this is wrong," he said. Hicks spat. Ain't my business what's true. My business is doing what I'm told. That night, James found Jacob pacing. It's begun, Jacob said. They're saying you acted improper. Don't matter if it's lie. It's enough. His voice broke on the last word. James's fists clenched. Then let them come. Jacob shook his head. You can't fight the wind, boy. It carries words faster than reason. He looked away. You run, they'll hunt you. The next morning, Marcus summoned him to the study. The room smelled of tobacco and anger. You've brought shame, Marcus said quietly. Tell me it isn't true. James stood straight. It isn't. His voice didn't tremble. Marcus studied him, cold eyes weighing centuries of hierarchy. Do you understand what's being said? I do. And you deny it? Yes, sir. Silence stretched. Long, heavy, final. Then Marcus nodded once. I'll handle this privately. He rang for Hicks. Take him back to his quarters. Outside, Jacob waited by the forge. He saw the look in James's eyes, the stillness before a storm. What did he say? James answered. He's thinking. That's worse than shouting. Jacob's voice lowered. When men like him think, others bleed. He touched the anvil with reverence, as though seeking strength from its iron heart. Stay near the fire tonight. Hicks appeared before dusk, carrying a lantern. Master wants no work till morning. Keep him in quarters. His eyes avoided James's. Orders. Then he walked away too quickly. Jacob watched the retreating light. They planning something, he murmured. Feels like the air before lightning. James nodded, jaw tight. Then I'll stand where it strikes. The forge glowed red against the dark. James stoked the coals, every motion precise, ritualistic. He didn't fear what came. He only feared losing himself before it arrived. From the veranda above, Marcus watched. Rain threatened again, thunder whispering in the distance. In his mind, the decision had already begun to form. Slow, cruel, absolute. Inside the forge, Jacob whispered to himself like prayer. Storm always coming one way or another. Outside, the first raindrops fell, each one hissing into the fire like prophecy fulfilled. The hammer waited on the anvil, slick with moisture, gleaming beneath the storm light. James stared at it, breathing steady, knowing the weight of silence had finally found its voice. The night roared with thunder, the forge burned hotter, and in that moment, every man on Belmont Hall felt something shift, unseen but irreversible, a fault line opening beneath their world. The morning came without birdsong. Only the forge breathed, slow, low, like an animal waiting to be struck. James stood beside Jacob, eyes fixed on the rising smoke curling into gray sky. Men moved strangely that day, avoiding glances, stepping wide around silence. Hicks barked orders softer than usual. Even he seemed uncertain, like the air itself whispered of what was about to unfold. Marcus Sutherland's boots echoed across the yard. Each step sounded rehearsed, deliberate, belonging to a man who believed himself righteous. He carried a sealed letter. His jaw moved as if chewing judgment. Jacob saw him approach and stiffened. "Don't speak," he muttered. "Just stand tall." James obeyed. He felt the weight of invisible chains tightening with every heartbeat, every breath drawn in borrowed mercy. Marcus stopped before them. "You'll report to the house at midday," he said evenly. "Doctors coming from Richmond. Certain matters require correction." His tone was calm, but something inside the words burned. James nodded. "Yes, sir." Marcus studied his face for rebellion, found only quiet resignation. "You understand this is consequence," he said. "Order must be preserved." Then he turned, leaving only dread behind. When Marcus disappeared into the main house, Jacob exhaled like a dying bellows. "Doctor," he spat, "ain't no healing in what's coming? They dressing punishment in church clothes again." His hands shook. James stared into the coals. "If this is what they call mercy," he said softly, "I'd rather face wrath." Jacob's throat tightened. "Don't talk that way, boy. Words got ears here." The day dragged heavy. Noon came wrapped in thunderclouds. Hoofbeats thundered up the lane, the carriage black as confession. 2 men descended, one in coat and gloves, one in silence. Dr. Cornelius Ashby had the pale eyes of men who believed in their own necessity. His hands, white and precise, looked better suited for ink than flesh. "Let's have this done efficiently." Hicks led him toward the main house. Jacob followed in their wake, every step weighted with years of obedience turned to ash. James stayed behind until summoned, watching rain darken the yard. He wanted to run. Every nerve screamed for it. But the thought of Jacob, of Rachel, of the others, it anchored him. Flight would only feed the fire they'd built. Jacob returned an hour later, soaked through, eyes hollow. "They mean to do it proper," he whispered. "Room's been cleared upstairs. Table set like supper. Only thing missing's Grace." James met his gaze. "Then I'll walk in myself." Jacob grabbed his arm. "Don't give them that." James's voice steadied. "They already took everything else. Let me keep the choice of walking." When Hicks appeared again, he didn't meet James's eyes. "Come on," he muttered. The rain had slowed, leaving the air slick with tension. Each step toward the house felt final. Inside, candles burned bright and cruel. The smell of boiled linen and spirits filled the hall. Marcus stood near the doorway, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "Bring him," he said quietly. The room waited like a sermon's end. A table, white cloth, metal instruments gleaming beneath lamplight. Ashby arranged them with the reverence of ritual. "Strong hands," he said, glancing at James. "Good." Jacob entered behind them, hat in hand. Marcus gestured. "You'll assist." Jacob froze. "Sir?" "You'll assist," Marcus repeated. The command fell like a verdict. Jacob's protest died on his tongue. James stepped forward. He did not kneel. He looked at the table, then at Marcus. "You want order?" he said quietly. "Here it is." Then he laid himself down without flinching. Ashby nodded once. "Hold him." Hicks moved to one side, Jacob to the other. The doctor unrolled his instruments, metal whispering against leather. The sound colder than any winter. The first cut broke the room open. James's breath left him in a strangled gasp. Jacob closed his eyes. Hicks held tighter. Marcus turned away but didn't leave. None of them spoke. Minutes passed like lifetimes. Sweat dripped, flesh trembled. The hammer outside the forge fell silent, as though even iron refused to echo this act. Then, silence. Thick. Absolute. Ashby's voice broke it. "It's done." He cleaned his hands with methodical grace. "He'll live." Marcus nodded, his face carved from marble. "See that he does." His tone held no victory, only ruin. Jacob helped lower James from the table. Blood soaked the linens, steam rising where life met steel. "I'm sorry, boy," Jacob whispered. James didn't answer. His eyes stared past the room. They carried him downstairs, through corridors that smelled of wealth and rot. Rain drummed against the roof. Somewhere a door slammed. The plantation exhaled. One long breath of corruption. In the kitchen, Jacob laid James on a cot. Sarah fetched cloth and water, her hands shaking. Hicks lingered in the doorway, face pale. "Orders is orders," he muttered before leaving. Jacob sat beside the bed through the night. He wiped blood, changed bandages, whispered prayers he didn't believe. When dawn came, James stirred, barely, and whispered, "Still here." Jacob's heart broke at the sound. "Aye," he said softly, "still here." He pressed a damp cloth to the boy's brow as if cooling an iron that had been too long in fire. Days passed in silence. James healed slow, his strength returning like reluctant forgiveness. But something in him had shifted. His eyes no longer searched horizons, only the ground beneath his feet. Marcus visited once. He stood at the doorway, studying the broken man who had once been Promise. "You'll rest, then work," he said. His words fell like stones. Then he left. Jacob waited until the footsteps faded. "He thinks you finished," he said. "He don't understand iron." James's voice was hollow. "Iron bends when it must." His eyes flickered. "But it remembers." Weeks passed. James returned to the forge. His hammer rose and fell again, slow but precise. The others watched, whispering of miracles, curses, and men who refused to vanish. Each strike carried memory. Each spark was defiance wrapped in rhythm. Even silence bowed to it, the sound of a man reclaiming what couldn't be stolen, even when his body was. Jacob watched from the doorway, pride and sorrow mixing in his chest. He whispered, "You endure, boy." James didn't look up. "Enduring ain't living," he said, "but it'll do till living returns." That night, rain returned. The forge glowed deep into darkness. James worked until his arms trembled, until fire blurred into memory, until pain and purpose became one single truth. He quenched the final piece and stared into steam. His reflection wavered, ghost-like. For a long time he said nothing, then whispered, "They can't cut the heat from me." Outside, the storm howled through the tobacco fields. Inside, one man stood unbroken, his silence louder than thunder, his breath steady as steel cooling under his own unyielding will. Dawn came gray and hollow. The forge stood cold, its fire gone to ash. James sat beside it, hands motionless, eyes distant, a man half in the world, half buried beneath it. Jacob entered quietly, carrying a small loaf and water. "Eat," he said. James didn't move. The air between them was heavy, a silence shaped like mourning, too dense for comfort. Outside, men trudged toward the fields. The overseer's voice cracked against the air, sharp, routine, cruel. Yet even Hicks's tone seemed dulled, as though something unspoken haunted every man on the grounds. James finally spoke. "It's strange," he said softly. "The pain leaves, but not the echo." Jacob watched the boy's reflection in the cold anvil. "Echo's proof you still alive." James's jaw tightened. "Alive ain't the same as free." Jacob looked down. "Freedom's a dangerous word here." He sat heavily, bones creaking. "But maybe it starts smaller, with silence that belongs to you." The day passed slow. Men worked, sweat mixed with dust, and Belmont Hall creaked under the weight of its secrets. Marcus stayed hidden in his study, writing letters he'd never sign. By evening, the forge flickered again. James relit the coals, slow and steady. He worked without sound, hammering only small nails, useless things. But they gave his hands a reason. Jacob watched from the doorway. "You're building ghosts," James answered without turning. "Better ghosts than nothing." The hammer struck once, twice, rhythm slow as breathing, heavy as regret. Hicks appeared at dusk. His face looked older. "Master says you to return to full work tomorrow." His voice lacked authority now, just the tremor of a man who'd seen too much. James nodded. "Tell him I'll be ready." Hicks hesitated, then said, "You don't deserve what happened." His eyes darted toward the house. "None of us do." Then he left, quickly, like shame. When night came, Jacob lit a single candle. "You think of leaving?" he asked. James's eyes glimmered faintly. "Every time the wind moves west." He paused. "But there's always someone to pay the price." Jacob's throat worked. "Maybe not forever." He looked toward the hills beyond the fields. "There's talk of routes north, men moving, quiet, careful. You'd be worth saving." James said nothing, but the silence shifted. Days turned to weeks. The forge roared again, though never as bright. James's movements grew sharper, colder. The others noticed, but never asked. Everyone carried something unspeakable now. Marcus came less often. His sermons about order and mercy faded into the dust. Even he began avoiding the forge. The sound of it reminded him too clearly of consequence. Jacob coughed more often, his body surrendering inch by inch. "You'll outlive me," he said one night. "And when you do, take that hammer and make something they can't erase." James nodded. "Something strong enough to hold the truth." His eyes flickered like steel in firelight. "Maybe even my name." Jacob smiled weakly. "That'll be enough." Then came the fever. It swept through the quarters without mercy. Hicks fell first, then 2 field hands, then Jacob. James tended to him through nights that smelled of iron and sweat. Jacob's voice grew faint. "You gotta go, boy." His fingers clutched James's wrist with surprising strength. "Don't die here. Not in this place that feeds on men's bones." James looked away. "They'll come after the others." Jacob shook his head. "They always come. But if one gets away, the rest remember hope." He coughed hard, then whispered, "Go." By morning, Jacob was gone. The forge felt emptier than ever. James buried him behind the quarters beneath an oak, marking the grave with an old horseshoe shaped into a cross. That night, James packed what little he had: hammer, flint, water pouch. The road north waited, silent and wide. He looked back once at the glow of Belmont Hall. For the first time, he felt no fear, only exhaustion, the kind that turns into clarity. He whispered a promise to the wind. "They won't end me here." Then he walked. The world beyond the fields was thick with fog. Every sound seemed alive, branches cracking, owls crying, the river whispering like memory. Each step was a gamble against eternity. He crossed the knot-away by moonlight, boots soaked, heart steady. He didn't pray. He only listened, for dogs, for men, for betrayal. But all he heard was the rhythm of his breath. For days he traveled north. Hunger gnawed, but pride sustained him. He remembered Jacob's voice. "Keep your head low, your hands ready, your will harder than iron." That became his compass. On the 6th night, he found a barn near a deserted road. Inside slept a stranger, a field hand turned runaway. The man woke with a start, knife raised. James spoke first. "I'm not your enemy." The stranger studied him. "Then who are you?" James hesitated, then answered, "A blacksmith who forgot how to break." The man lowered the blade and nodded. They shared silence, not stories. In that quiet, something like brotherhood formed, the kind only fugitives understand. 2 men, nameless under the same cursed sky, bound by survival and grief. By dawn, the stranger left, heading east. James watched him disappear into mist. He envied him, that small illusion of choice. Then he turned north again, each step heavier than the last. Days later, the hills thinned. Smoke rose from a distant settlement. Pennsylvania, maybe. Freedom rumored, but never certain. He touched the hammer at his belt, the last piece of his past. He didn't know if the world ahead would see him as man or shadow. But he knew one truth. Silence was no longer his cage. It was his weapon. Years would pass. His name would fade, his story twisted, buried beneath time. But somewhere, men at forges would still strike iron, and the rhythm would carry his ghost. And in that rhythm, the echo of every blow, every breath, every unbroken vow, the memory of James Rutled would live, unspoken yet immortal, heavy as the weight of silence itself.